Welcome. Happy Friday. Welcome to Better Power Apps by Design. Today we'll start with a brief introduction to Power Apps and Design. We'll go through a case study to give some context to what we're going through. We're going to then talk about how user experience and user interface design and architectural design can improve the process. We'll have a bit of a live demo. And after some conclusions, we will have time for questions. Please note that there is a Q&A feature in the top right part of your screen. You can add questions at any time through the presentation, and we'll get to them at the end. My name is Rob Ulasik. I'm a technology director at Improving in Chicago.
Hey guys, I'm Josh Loftus. I'm a full stack software developer. Over the past 2 years, been focusing on Microsoft Cloud technologies, and I'll be giving some technical insights.
And hello, my name is Michael D'Onofrio, Experience Director here at Improving. Been doing this for many years, and I'll be talking to all of the UX, UI design elements in this presentation, and that's a major focus of mine at Improving.
All right, and off we go. So our goal with this demonstration is to help you learn how to incorporate UI and UX and technical design to produce better Power BI apps, Power Apps. There we go. First bug in the presentation out of the way. All right, starting point, Power Apps are powerful. Rapid development. It's very easy to build applications. There's no lag, very little ramp up. There's not a lot of setting up environments. It's all very easy to do. Low code, no code applications. This is designed to enable power users. You don't need to have a developer to do it. Lots of connectivity to data and processes. Dozens of connectors with Power Automate. The possibilities are endless. And an integrated application framework. You have a lot of stuff that you need to build an application already in place. Authentication, patterns for application flow, large set of controls. So you really have a great jumping off point to build a variety of different apps. Mobile apps, that was the founding purpose of Power Apps, to be able to put useful applications in people's hands that were connected to the enterprise. Beyond that, you can expand it to a large format app when you need some more real estate for more complex applications. You can build publicly accessible portals where you can share D365 and Dataverse data with the outside public as needed. And finally, there's an option where you can use these to improve on SharePoint forms. So you can make something much more complex than what you get out of the box. So admitting that they're powerful, there still are some pros and cons, and we touched on some of the pros. Rapid development, no environment to set up, it's all browser based. With that, some pretty low barriers to entry. A reasonably skilled power user can get started and build something that actually works and does something pretty quickly. And the language that's used on the inside is actually based off of Excel-like formulas. Last piece is that native integration with Microsoft 365. This is where a lot of people are doing the majority of their work these days, and having applications that are native to that, it's a huge plus. You could go do any custom web development you want, but then you'd have to tie it back into the 365 arena. Here it's all done for you right away. Well, the cons, it's not all peaches and cream. The development environment can be complex. I've heard one person refer to it as trying to fly the space shuttle. Lots of buttons and switches to master, and there's some quirks with the way it operates that you have to get used to. Going along with that, we did say that it can be done by a power user, but there's some stuff that we really need a developer mindset to get it done right. And things like variable scopes and components and things that just aren't normal for the power user to have under their belt right away, where a developer really gives you some extra edge. And finally, it's really easy to build ugly apps. You can build things and they will work, but they're not going to be that nice to look at. They may not be that easy to use. And it's going to be a little bit complicated to build something that's real quality. So when we're building applications, we're looking for this sweet spot. And when we talk about this, let's start with our basic Power Apps. We just talked about rapid development. We can put together very cheaply and fast. That's our upside. Downside, kind of bare bones. That's one end of the spectrum. The other side is traditional development, which we're all familiar with. You can be very fully featured, build a spec, make exactly what you want it to be. The downside is these can be expensive and slow. It can take a lot of resources and time to get that done. So what we're looking for is the high value. Let's see if we can get an easy to use application. It's great to use app, but with minimal effort and expense. That is the place that we're really shooting for. All right. So how do we get there? By design. We start with UX and UI design, where we're building an intuitive and consistent interface that helps the user get their work done with ease. We're going to hear more from Mike about how that gets done. That is a key element to any successful application, that the users actually like to use it and can use it to get their goals done. Second part of design, architectural. Now, this is under the covers. People won't necessarily see this. It's not something that's always apparent, but it's critical for this application to be flexible, be able to be debugged easily, be able to be expanded, and be part of an enterprise level suite of applications. So this is some complex topics. So we're going to take a look at a case study to give us some better framework for understanding the impact of embracing design. So we have a client problem that we solved. We had a small manufacturing company, small sales staff, and they have weekly sales meetings. And to prepare for these meetings, the sales manager asked each salesperson to send in an email by 10 a.m. Friday that includes, there's sort of free-form text, loosely, what are your top 5 clients, some general concerns, and soliciting that input that arrives by email. Problem with this process is once he gets those emails, it's very manual. He has to spend time cutting and pasting and collating, getting everything put together into a summary report that he then turns around and sends back out via email to the sales team and upper management, and then uses that for the agenda for the sales meeting. So, it's a solution. It does get things work, but it's state-of-the-art technology from 1998. So we'll see if we can find ways to do something better than that. As you'd expect, we're going to try and improve this process, and we're going to use Power Apps to do it because it's a great form for building these small, lightweight, but still very useful applications that help the business get done in a company. So the app we're going to build is going to start with our data entry mode. We want the sales team to be able to put in their data on a weekly basis. We want to use the form is going to guide that data entry, make it easier for them to provide consistent and complete information, and then have some helpful tools for the user. Like, I want to start from last week, so I want to copy this one. I want to copy all of it, but then blank a couple out. Make it easier to get better data from that sales team. It's going to end up with a better report. In the middle, this is the heart of everything. From the process point of view, everything's automated. Because of the platform that we're using some automation workflows with underlying structures. There'll be no more cutting and pasting. That sales manager just got 3 or 4 hours of their day back. They don't have to collate that stuff anymore. And the last part of this application is going to be a view mode, where we can allow any of the users involved to view the current report and even past reports from their phone or from their computer very easily without having to dig through email, which was the process in the past. So we've got a better process. How are we going to bring this to life? We came up with a pretty simple, straightforward solution architecture. It starts with SharePoint, great way to store data. We have one list that keeps track of the weekly input data, and we have another one that we use to collect grades for how things went during the course of the week. This Power Apps, as we mentioned, can be mobile. We've designed this one to work mobile and to be embedded in a SharePoint page. And what's helpful there is we can then include instructions right next to the app, especially as people are getting used to it and adopting it. They can get the lay of the land before they use it on their phone. And because Power Apps embeds inside of SharePoint, that was a great way to deliver that. Power Apps is the center of the solution. We have our 2 interfaces, one for data entry, one for viewing reports. And then we also work with Power Automate. This is how we get our automation to help everything work. One is deal with the processing of the report. We send reminders to salespeople saying, hey, get your input in, and then we send notifications that the new report is there. So 3 components that work together. They're all natively part of Microsoft 365 and a great starting point for building this functional app for the sales team. And with that, we built a basic solution from this app, which is embedded in SharePoint or from the phone. Each individual salesperson can edit this week's entry. They have all the fields they need to collect what's needed so that they can turn their information in. And going along with that, you then have the view reports feature where you can click on it, see the different reports from prior weeks from different salespeople. And we now have gotten past doing everything via email. Everything now is an assistant you can get to an app very easily from a desktop or a phone. So let's take a look at what that solution was. It met the requirements. It did do what we said. It collected data very well. It had automated processing, and we're able to view reports in the past. Great news, we built it in less than 40 hours. So it was a very quick hit, and that was done by just a power user. This wasn't any high-priced talent, any special skills. This was just someone who went through a training class, figured out how to use it, and they were able to build something that was pretty useful. But as you see, and we'll see a little bit more later, pretty bare bones solution. It does get the job done. It is not very visually appealing. It's a form, it has stuff on it, and there's some usability issues. There's a lot of clicking and scrolling, and you get easy to get lost when there's a lot of stuff there. There's about 25 or 30 data points that are needed every week, and it's just not a terribly efficient way to get all that done. So how do we make this better? We're going to focus on design. And what we're going to do first is focus on looking at user experience and user interface design, and I'll turn things over to Mike.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. We'll jump right in here and get into the UX UI side of things. Wanted to start off first with a little bit of background on design thinking. And so you might hear this term kind of get thrown around a lot. It's very popular for sure. But you know, how is this applied? What is the practical side of this idea and concept of design thinking? If you did want to look on your own and get into a little bit of background on it, I got a link there at the bottom. You can search on the interactiondesign.org site to find more information. They've got a lot of good stuff on it for sure. But probably the first point here, and the biggest point maybe, is this idea of empathize with the user. It's the concept of really understanding what their problems are, what they're trying to do. How do we really understand what they want to accomplish to make the best experience? I think that's the big difference between how a developer might approach a project. Technology first, you know, there's a solution, there's the technology. Let's find a way to solve that. The UX discipline will approach that on what does that user really need to do? How can we build a product around that user's needs? So that's basically what takes us into define. We're trying to really look at this app in this case, you know, get things in order. How does that user accomplish those goals? We'll show you how that kind of occurs in process. You ideate, you know, it's an iterative process. So whether it's iterate or ideate, that's the idea here, is we're coming up with ideas. We're seeing what sticks. We're looking at the strategy behind that UX, looking at UI patterns that make sense. And let's start prototyping right away. You know, as quickly as we can, let's start making something real, something that everyone can get their hands on. Now we're really, you know, interacting with the client, finding out what things work, what things don't. And that's where we really start to test. Now we can prove it. And if we can get to actual end users, that's the ideal. If we can't, certainly the stakeholders that are involved are going to be either using it to some degree or understand what it needs to do. So now we're testing together, and that collaborative process, which I'll talk about next, highly important. So that collaboration begins with, like I said, that kind of almost two sides of the brain, the developer and the experience individual, UX, UI kind of coming together to understand what needs to happen here. So we're doing those interviews with the client. We're talking through all of those needs, pain points, you know, what is the process? Each discipline comes to the table, and this allows us to kind of create something and iterate. So you're probably familiar with, you know, low fidelity wireframe type of things. If it's a user flow, whatever it is, to really establish what we believe is the best way to go, or in the early stages, that allows us to start to find those unique solutions as we start to grow. And in this process, we're learning. We're all learning together, and we're learning about what Power Apps can do, what it's best at, where some of those weaknesses might be, and how we solve for those along the way. And like I said, it happens very fast. And you'll see this come up later that Josh will show you. There's a lot of stuff out of the box. It's great. It's powerful, as Rob said too. There's so much that it can do. How do we simplify that? How do we look at, you know, the most streamlined process that we can have, choose the best parts out of the box to get to a prototype quickly? And how we do that, how that really starts to come to life, is this concept of the happy path. This might be another kind of term you hear, but what does that exactly mean? Well, it's all about that quickest path to the solution, to the end goal for the user. So once we establish those goals early up front, now we can start to develop that pathway through the product. How can I reduce clicks? How can I reduce clutter? Can I make it even faster? If I reduce kind of one action down to 3 clicks, can I make it 2 clicks? What are the easiest ways and the fastest ways for me to see things? What is the best way for me to preview information? Where are those efficiencies? Let's find them all throughout the way. And we'll hear this harped on several times, is the idea of consistency. That's what creates a great experience. So we're creating templates, we're creating consistent patterns with our UI, consistent menuing, colors, whatever it might be. All of those things come into play. So once we establish those patterns, we keep them consistent throughout the experience. A key part to any good user experience is the removal of doubt. When I click on something, I want to know exactly what it's going to get me. That's that true nature. You want that intuitive experience. I don't want to have like extra training or have these buttons that make me unclear, unsure what it's going to do. If we can make things as clear and simple as possible, you remove that doubt, and that's going to create the best user experience. So now you get into that phase of true prototyping and gathering feedback. And again, we try to go through things as quickly as possible. We're using some of those traditional UX UI methods, but we're trying to get into Power Apps and build things as bare bones as we can to start, as simply as we can, because it's less throwaway. That's a huge part of this process and how we move quickly. It is more of that kind of agile process when you look at it, because we want to get there as fast as possible and not waste time out of the application. Let's get in right away and see what it can do. We're involved, back and forth with the client throughout this process, iterating, whether it's 2, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, whatever we can get through to find out what those complicated processes are. Where does this fall down? You'll hear this all the time too, the concept of failing fast. The idea is to really prove what is working, what isn't working. Let's get this in the hands of some real users if we can, to get that real feedback, because this is for them. It's built around them. It has to work. It has to have meaning for them. We're trying to solve those initial pain points and problems. Let's make sure that we're doing it. So as we get closer to that, we're ready to just refine and repeat as necessary to get to that end product.
All right, that was great insight. Now let's move on to architectural design, where Josh will walk us through some of the technical concerns.
Thanks, Rob. So to start off, you'll notice on all those nice 5 pictures, when you start off in Power Apps, you have a lot of options. Main point here, be selective. Just because there are dozens of options doesn't mean you have to use all of them. By limiting your controls, you can easily form a common language between designer and developer that will expedite development even further. Also, choosing basic controls will keep development simple and the application easy for the users to understand. While it is possible to extend the set of Power Apps controls, I won't recommend it. There's so many options out of the box that just help you avoid the pitfalls of customization. Next, think globally. I'll start off by pointing out all of those lovely red arrows on the left-hand side under individual controls. All those red lines are horrible. Every time, all those represents is every time you make a change that you're going to have to make a change for each instance of those red lines. That alone is costly. On top of that, whenever you do update your code base, there's an opportunity for bugs or just general UI inconsistency to be introduced. That is also bad, and that will delay development and increase cost. On the other hand, if you see on the right-hand side, we start off by shoving all those red lines into one single global component, and then reflect that component across 3 separate screens. Those 3 blue lines are free, and now whenever we want to change any of the styling, we just need to change in the source of truth, and then it will trickle down to all the places we use that component. Not only does thinking globally and using global components save time initially by reducing the amount of development, it also makes maintaining and updating the app easier and safer. On top of this, it complements your designer's goal of creating consistent and recognizable features. Okay. Now this is kind of a combination of the previous two slides put into practice. Here you'll see a single component uses just 4 of our simple controls and a set of business logic we were given by the product owner. And this went into creating over half of our application's UI, this single screen. Once again, I'll reiterate, a change made to one of these controls is reflected across all that 50% of our app. And so something trivial like a font size change, instead of being an entire day's worth of work, is now trivial. And then also, because the controls were used so many times throughout our app, we had excess time and budget to focus on other user experience. Next, separation of concerns. The real key here is to let the user behavior drive design and not the underlying technology. I'll start off with the horrible out-of-the-box version of the SharePoint list we used form. The out-of-the-box version on the left there is when technology drives the design. As you can see, all the inputs are pretty uniform in size. There's no highlighting, there's no coloring, there's nothing to pull in the user and draw their attention. This also involves the user scrolling, I believe, over 5 screens to view the entire form. Yeah, and so that is just not as usable, and you would get decreased input from your users. And then I'll direct your attention to the right-hand side. Once we got the understanding of how the users would like to work, we modified the interface to allow data entry to be broken down into more digestible steps. You'll see the tabular design up top there between half the report, which was top 5s, and the other half, which was just general form inputs. So that alone cut the form in half. And then from there, we were able to create a generalized view screen that then led to an edit screen to further decouple viewing and how they consumed their previously input data and the data that they are currently inputting. And additionally, grouping individuals' controls and business logic into components made it all practical. We don't have to write special save logic for each of those fields that you see on the far right view, where it brings you in to edit a specific field or a specific top 5 entry. All of that was reused across all of the fields. Finally, to bring it all together, this is more my 2 cents on how this design, or these design approaches, have drastically changed development from my point of view. We've started off with some technical topics, but it's worth reiterating how our collaboration was truly at the heart of this process. From my personal experience, I can tell you that there is absolutely nothing worse than staying up till midnight the night before completing a project and then to have everything get thrown away because either the product owner didn't consult the product users or there was just a miscommunication. Our goal here is to be more proactive, and by getting the UX designer, product owner, and developer all in the same room early on, we address these issues as they come up. This makes sure that we're all moving the ball forward to meet the business goals, deliver a solid user experience, and also keep track of the technical aspects. Some example pitfalls that could happen if you did segregate these meetings between either owner and designer, for instance, then you could end up with some bad technical solutions happening. Or you get the designer and developer in a meeting alone, and then the business goals could fall by the wayside. Or even, God forbid, the owner and the developer end up in a room alone together. Then you could add some great new features, but with horrible UX, so no one would bother using it because they won't understand it. In practical terms, it's best to meet with your designer every 1 to 2 days, just because Power Apps is so darn easy to quickly design and develop together. And then if you can meet with the product owner every 1 to 2 weeks to really get them involved, seeing them boots on the ground, get them feeling like they're part of the design and technical development process. Really encourages them to make the app feel like their own and feel confident bringing it to their users for go live, to the point where the example that this talk is based off of, we didn't even have to create like how to use. He felt comfortable all on his own, just in a 5-minute meeting explaining to everyone how it worked.
That's great, Josh. So let's take some time now to look at the UI UX design process and the technical design process and the fruits of how that came together to make a better app. All right, so here you will see that we have our app embedded in the SharePoint page. And as I mentioned earlier, this app will run right off of the phone. It runs in this page, one, because it's sometimes you're working from your desk, and second, it was great as we were getting our early adoption. Here's some instructions, here's how things should work so that you can get that reinforcement and get people comfortable with it right away. You'll see the screen, it already is doing something a bit unique in that it's helping the user work with where they are in the process. They put data in every week, and they are either in the process of editing the data for the given week, or they're starting from scratch. So as soon as one period ends, the next one starts, and the system has been smart to know, hey, if you're editing, I'm going to send you down the edit path. I can't touch any of these new buttons and break anything. Or if it's a start of a new week, you can start from scratch, the blank slate, or you can start with using some of the data from last week to sort of help you get that data in. Maybe there's some stories that you need to tell over the course of a few weeks and they're still relevant. There's an easy way to do that. So we'll go into the edit process to see what this looks like. And here you'll see the entry of the top 5 client news. And what will happen is you have the ability to specify the client you're working with, give it a grade, and then add details about what's going on.
Yeah, I can mention some about the UI here, Rob, too. When we look at these patterns that we created, we've got a basic tab design at the top, basic tab menu. Use of iconography was brought in. You'll see this as a consistency throughout the experience. Whenever that pencil is seen, that's our edit. This one was a little unique for the top 5 in that we had to bring in that ABC kind of ranking that they were looking for. So see color applied to that. And throughout the experience, you can go ahead and hit one of those edits. You'll see that that idea follows the user around, that if I want to switch grades, I shouldn't have to go back or, you know, click somewhere else. I should have the ability to kind of just switch and look at things as I go through them. When I get through the actual data and look at it, you'll see this later, that experience holds true throughout, that I have that letter grade that follows me around.
All right, so the last thing I want to show is we showed the top 5 and you can scroll through to get them. We have the color coding. They came up with the colors that they wanted to use, and that was an important visual aspect for them. And then we can also go through this general information, and it follows the same concept. Josh, did you want to?
Yeah, so I'll speak quickly to the reusability of our components. So as you can see, the same view was the one we just visited on top 5 with a little dynamic styling. But you'll see this screen reappear. You'll see that tabular header up top reappear all throughout the app. All of that is the same control, even when it shows up on different screens. And then actually, if you want to pop back to the initial screen, the entry screen, I'll note one of the, or actually, if you want to click the X there too, take us back to the home page.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so you'll see here, this was one of the things that I felt as a developer I contributed, and Mike as a designer contributed to the user experience of it, where if you notice, because Rob has already started his entry here, it starts off by highlighting the edit button, and the start new and start from last week are disabled. If he hadn't started yet, then edit would be removed, and there's actually a little tidbit explaining what you need to do to get it working. So it's a very simple change that made the continuous input of data that they needed a lot smoother and a lot more recognizable for the user to come back to.
Excellent. So we'll go take a look at the past reports. So when we go into our past reports, we can see at the very top, even before we go into a report, that we have a general grade for the week. How did the week go? And this was something that came about as you were trying to go through the email reports that they used to be. It was hunt and find the right information for what was important. So from here, we can go take a look at the week that just ended. And what you'll see is we again have this overview concept where before I'm looking at any details, I can get a very quick thumbnail view of what is important. Hey, I had 40% were A's. That's fantastic, which, while wonderful, what I'm really concerned about is what are these F's? What do we need to address? What's going wrong? And that's sort of an addition that made some extra usability. So if we then follow that same pattern, we click into it and we can see what are the things that were F's. Now what you'll see is in this particular week, each of the salespeople reported an F. No matter where it came from, show me all the things that are going wrong, not just show me Josh's wrong, show me Rob's wrong, show me Mike's, put it all in one spot. And from here, you can also change. All right, I understand where the F's are. That's fine. I could actually see it in more detail if I needed, but I want to switch gears. I don't need to go 2 screens back. I say, hey, give me the B. So give me some good news, make me feel better about things. But this is the whole concept where you're able to get through the data in a reasonable and smart way. Just makes it easier to use. Mike?
Yeah, and this is one of the things we found out too through the iterative process, just how this previewing concept was helpful, where it would be more helpful, how they can kind of get from that starting point. If you want to go ahead and click back, Rob, is that what they can preview at that first glance. Hey, I got into reports. What am I seeing? I get that kind of percentage view, that sort of roll up of like it's a weekly grade, if you will. But then when I click through, now I get another form of previewing. So as we sort of built out our iterations, it came, more and more apparent that like, hey, we could take advantage of more previewing as we go. So we built that in, started to use the color indicators, that kind of visual design element, so they could kind of see that at a glance very quickly. I don't just have to look at the numbers. I could see right away which one is, got a higher percentage than another. And then once I get in, it's kind of the same idea that I can now kind of preview some of those individual reports. I can see a little bit of copy from each one, and then drill in based on how much time I have. That was also something we learned throughout the process. Based on the timing of when they're checking, how they're checking, that's when those previews became much more valuable for the type of information that they wanted at a glance.
Yeah, and then I'll jump in and say something. I'll note that once again, I'll sound like a broken record. Reusability, you'll see the tabular header, you'll see the gallery view, you'll see the view form. But the main point to take away from this is when the client came to us with this business process, they thought viewing reports and editing reports were 2 separate things. We were able to combine those two to the extent that once me and Mike nailed down the edit and the user input part, this view reports part was already done. This is all essentially reusing stuff. There was maybe 2 small views that we had to make, but that was once again using very simple Power Apps controls. And so we literally chopped our app in half from what we needed to develop, which was a huge bonus.
All right, so that's a pretty good app. Before we move on, I just want to give you a quick comparison. So here we have our 2 apps side by side. You can see our bare bones app and our one that's better by design, all built on the same lists, built on the same workflows, but you get a dramatically different result. I'm going to go edit my data for this week, and I've got fields of scrolling my text things that are long. If these fields were actually made longer, this form would be even more scrolling. So you can see that it's really a rudimentary. It does gather data, but it's really not friendly versus what we just saw, where data entry is a snap. It's very easy to see where things are at. Key things are brought out. Just a sort of a night and day difference when we see these 2 apps. All right. So let's see what kind of conclusions we can draw from what we've seen so far. Looking at our better app, visually appealing, very right from the jump, you can see that it's better quality. It's just easier to use. And, this really fit in with the way the salespeople were working. They would rarely sit down and fill out the entire form. They want to do one client one day, added another one, and over the course of the week put stuff in, and this ability to break stuff up really made that come to the fore. That really made that something easy to do. You can't see it, but it's technically sound. And as we were building this app, we had issues. Actually, as we were preparing this demo, we found a couple little bugs to fix, and it turned out the way we built everything was very, very simple to find the issue and correct it, to the point where while I'm on the phone with Josh, he is fixing the app. And that's really what we're trying to get to, is just because you can build as a power user, that's great, but it really is some value to having developers' mindset put stuff to work. It's sort of a better tool set for them to work with than just raw code, which they can do, but this sort of really speeds up the process. And yeah, we did use some skilled resources. You know, Mike is a very seasoned designer. Josh is a very capable developer on many platforms, and you know, bringing in all that knowledge and how things worked really made a big difference. But even with that, it still got done in under 120 hours. That's that rapid development nature that we're talking about, where it's very easy to get something very viable up and running pretty quickly. And, you know, something that came about from this, and Josh touched on it, when we were able to get through some of these things faster, we were able to go back to the sponsor and they were like, oh, well, now that I see this screen, I'd love to add this piece to it. And, you know, when we were done, our app exceeded the initial requirements. It was more than just gathering data and producing a report. It was a really nice way of getting that data done, and then a slick way of not just viewing the report, but being able to go through it in a way that made sense. When you had 25 data points from 4 different users, that could be hard. The old email was a long scroll. The summary that you saw that was color coded and showed you where things are with the little graph was a literal hand crafted character-based chart in email, where someone had to make sure they spaced up the numbers right to do it. So really sort of went past it. So our conclusion, this is a better app by design. All right, so let's do a little bit more of a comparison. You know, our bare bones versus our better by design. Both apps were an improvement over that manual process. Not, you know, that was great to be able to get over that hump. It was a great thing to get started. Easier and more consistent data collection. No more manual processes deal with things, and a better way to find historical stuff. You're not digging through email. So that made some progress. But I think it's pretty solid argument that when we did our better by design app, we really moved the needle. We added to that value in a bunch of different ways. You know, that system detects the current data entry mode and makes sure the user goes down the right path. They're not accidentally creating a second record for this week. They're not, you know, getting lost with where they were. Where did my data go? Oh, because the week turned over. It sort of guides them through that. We got that atomic data entry matches that pattern. Now, it's more technical terms, but instead of one giant record we're saving with that long scroll, we save the little pieces that people are working on along the way. So much more user-friendly. That preview we just talked about, showing the key details at a glance. Tell me how we're doing overall. Tell me where the bad parts are. Things you can see in just the seconds of looking at stuff. The cross-cut views. So in the past, you know, the sales manager had to copy and paste things into the right spot so you could see all of Josh's input and Mike's and Rob's. Here we now say, give me the A's, give me the B's, give me all of the competitor intel, give me all the wins for the week, give me the losses. Very easy to see that and digest that information, not just see it and have to do it all in your head. And the last part, it really is based on a solid architecture. And we talked about the maintenance aspect of it, but what's really interesting with this is that in building this app, we not only delivered for this sales team, but the person in charge said, hey, I got another app that does something different, but it's, you know, it's close. And because of our reusable components, some of them are going to get the building blocks for the next app. So we had 2 benefits there. One, it's even more efficient to build your second app, and because we're reusing the same components, you get that consistency. It all looks like it works together instead of a bunch of little tools. So I think it's pretty safe to argue that we found the sweet spot. You know, we have a easy to use, great looking app. Let's see how the numbers came out with effort and time. So as we mentioned, our basic Power App, under 40 hours, but the quality was kind of limited. It got the job done, but it wasn't anything special. We then put together an estimate for a traditional web application development process, soup to nuts, and you know, it would likely be a very high quality application, but we're looking at least 320 hours of work to get all this done. And then our better Power App by Design, we got a very high quality app in under 120 hours. So we sort of found that best of breed where it's this very powerful rapid delivery platform, but done in a thoughtful way, both from a user perspective and a technical perspective. The result, you get a significant return for just an incrementally larger investment. Our app was not as cheap as bare bones, but it was nowhere near what that full featured one would be. So I think that sweet spot has definitely been found. So when we try to make this happen and replicate it, along the way, we found several key to success, ways we can really make sure that this concept pays off. Starts with getting the buy-in for a slightly larger investment. Everyone is cost conscious, but there's an argument to be made that spending a little bit more money, a little bit more time can really make a huge difference. So that's the first thing, is make sure you can get that sponsor to understand what those benefits can be. Moving along, Josh touched on this one earlier. Developers love to develop, and I've had people use Power Apps and say, I built 7 separate controls, which is fantastic. It took time to do those, build them right. It's time to test them, time to integrate them. Power Apps is a continuously updating platform where the underlying code changes. It's entirely possible that introduced risk for having to redo more code for the customizations. And really, if you're going Power Apps, the whole point is to try to keep those customizations to a minimum. And this is why we say stick with the out-of-the-box features and functionality. I can't say it enough. Include the UI UX design resources. Having someone like Mike's skills involved in this process from the beginning just ensured a better product all the way through. And it is night and day between those two. The development experience I just touched on. Josh is a fantastic developer, took all the things that he's used in traditional development practices and just applied them to the Power Apps platform. Those things don't change. These principles have been around for decades for a reason. Just apply them in this area and take the time and the thought to make sure you do apply them. You're going to get results. Make sure these resources can collaborate. That really was key. A rapid development platform enables this collaboration, so you got to make sure that you use it. And Josh touched on how all 3 angles have to come together and work together to really get that good quality product. Sometimes you can get bogged down in meetings and emails and that kind of stuff, and the most productive was these guys went and said, I got an hour, 2 hours, we're going to get on a call, go back and forth and hash this stuff out. They would do the same thing with the sponsor on that little more periodic basis, but that is what ensured this thing really came together. You're going to really rely on the user perspectives. If you go to traditional development, you'll have a business analyst go through and identify a very long set of specific requirements in this very formal process, and this is where that time and money comes in. In this case, we want to take advantage of that rapid nature. So to counteract not having explicit, very well-defined requirements for everything, we want to be with that user or someone who can speak for them right from the jump. Right away, we're inferring a lot of those requirements. We're able to show them things and they go, yeah, we do use this extra field, or we don't need that one, versus having to tease that out through some long process. So really relying on the user to make sure that we can build what they're looking for, gets a much better outcome. The iterative process. This, again, can't be overstated. Being able to go show the result right then and there. Okay, we had something with that app where we were going to change the ordering of the top 5, and they're like, we don't really care. We just need the top 5 things. We need 5 things that you have. Where they are doesn't matter. So we made some changes there. That was something we teased out just through working at it, where they would see the product. And with that is tied in is meeting with that sponsor often. They need to know and see where the progress is. Not is it done yet, but hey, is this meeting what I had in mind? Because very often we'll find somebody says they want to build an app and they can try to tell us what it is, but they can never really tell us completely right at the beginning. They need to see that stuff along the way. That gives them the clues to go, hey, this is what I really meant. I want you to take this little bit and add on to it. You get that by working with them on a regular basis. And then finally, we're going to build components with an eye towards reuse. Not only did building components make that app easier and better, it was less code. It took less time to put that together. When we then get building blocks to build other applications, that is a starting point. You get the consistency, you get, even more efficient with the build process on there. There's just a lot of benefit to doing that component process. So that was a lot. This is a complex topic, a lot of things going on. At this point, we're open for questions. We can see if anything's been added along the way.
Unfortunately, there are no questions in the Q&A.
All right, well, this is the time now. Maybe you've been holding your questions. Anything you want to know about how this works, how it came together, we can give you some extra insight.
Yeah, we have one in.
Aha.
It seems like the weakest link in the process is an unprepared client. They need to behave in a way that fits with the iterative, high contact pace of development. How does one prepare the client?
Mike, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to add some color there. I can see where there's a few challenges, like the availability. If this is a lean team, that's kind of the ideal. If there are multiple stakeholders or larger audiences that need to be involved, that's where you do have to have some ability to be flexible and to bring in those other parties. But if we can keep it to a minimal group, you're able to move a lot faster. So in terms of preparing the client, I think it's about just that commitment to the project, to be able to be accessible, have them the ability to be available every week, to know that there's that kind of time involvement. And I think it can move at a slower pace if it needs to. But the iterative process, I think, is something that more and more are getting accustomed to. And even if they can't get in the room every day, every other day, if it's every week, you can still make it work.
Yeah, and I'll build on that. So I think it really comes into two perspectives of things that you can use to convince a product owner of this. One is, anytime we're building apps, the first question that comes up each week, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Well, this is a great way to put that right in front of them. Here's where we are. If they're not, staying up at night, geez, I hope this app is on track. A lot's riding on this. I didn't make sure this gets done. We're able to give that pretty instant feedback. They can see it, they can get that comfort level and go, aha, they are on the right path. Or, you know what, I forgot to tell them of this thing. Let me make sure I steer them the right way. And that ability to show that progress is something they can build the confidence themselves. They can report up going, hey, I know this is going, I've seen it, it's been working. It does take more commitment, but it's actually worth it. The second piece is we can offer up some pretty good examples of what happens when things go wrong. When you don't take this approach, you can end up with either something that's really not what you were looking for, or it may be great, but it took a lot longer and a lot more time. So it's, we can demonstrate some of those, time and money advantages to taking this approach, and it's an investment on their part, but I think it's one that we can show, pretty good return on, where there's a lot of upside. Great question.
I see no further questions at this point, so I guess unless someone wants to pop one in real quick. Yeah, but here it comes.
Oh, excellent.
The library of reusable elements is a good idea. How does one manage that library if they are used across many tools or developers? Indexed, searchable, catalog variants, one function that might be applicable to different data sources.
That sounds like me. Can I take it? Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that is actually a really great part of the Power Platform, is they're in the process of linking it, tech term, they're linking it with Git, which gives you version control. And then on top of that, they have a section where you post your apps, and then an entirely decoupled section called your component library, where everywhere in that Power Apps environment, you can pull in those components. And then to speak to your point about the data, for all of our components, actually, the data is injected after we add the component to the page. And so it's actually not at all data indicative, where we can essentially reformat the data to fit into the component very easily, very easily. So yes, that was a great question, though. Yeah.
And I'll build on that one too. And that's so that difference between power users whipping up some apps because they were able to do something very quickly and that developer perspective, that reuse. Separating those things so that you can go forward and not have to have the data concerns. That's using an enterprise class development mindset with a rapid development Power Platform. So the last thing I'll put on there is I mentioned Power Apps, like all Microsoft 365 continuous improvement model. This is not a static product. It's continuously adding things. They keep the Git functionality that Josh mentioned, and those libraries are in the past 6 to 9 months. They keep adding new things. They're sensing where this stuff is, and it keeps maturing. That's what really gives it a lot of promise. And they're obviously taking the feedback from developers, going, "Hey, I need these extra features to really make this an enterprise class development platform," and they're really taking that to heart. So it does take some thought, and you need to understand how some of these things work, but it definitely is capable of that. And it shows a lot of promise.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, I'll jump back in for a sec. Believe it or not, in our app, we use the same components across 2 separate lists. We had a list called Pro Market Index, and then we had our list that stored most of our data. So even in this very app, we were pulling from 2 different data sources.
All right, if anyone would like to ask another question, please do so.
We got 30 more seconds. Beat the clock.
We should have had a Jeopardy timer set up.
All right. Well, I think that's the questions that we have gotten. Very happy to be able to present this to you today, and I hope it enlightens that incorporating design can really make Power Apps an even more powerful platform and something really worth looking at to help build business value. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank everyone for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.